Welcome CSC103 class to our clone stamp exercise using Photopea. This should work just like it works in Photoshop, except we'll be using Photopea, so you can do it at home or do it in class without having to use Photoshop. And this should be a fairly simple exercise. This shouldn't take hours or anything like that. This should take a good 15-20 minutes, maybe a half hour to get it right. And just to give you an example of what we're going to do, this is just an example. This is the starting picture right here, these two kids on a beach, and then we have a girl here in front of the waves and a bunch of people in the ocean, and we want to get rid of them. So we're going to have it look like that. And what we're going to do is use the clone stamp tool, which is the one over here that looks like kind of a rubber stamp, and we're going to use that. And what we do is we actually paint neighboring pixels. So just for example, if I zoom in here, what we're going to do to get rid of this person here to start is we're going to have to paint areas that look very close to where that would be. So we can't just cut her out and get rid of her. We have to kind of paint over. So we're going to go over here and kind of sample pixels and kind of paint over pixels. We're not going to copy areas and paste areas. We're going to paint as we go so that it picks up similar textures and similar colors as we go. In some cases, it's not that hard to do. In other cases, it's a little tricky because you have to be aware of the subtle little color changes. And if you do it too fast or too sloppy, it looks fake. So we want to kind of do some magic here so it looks real. So on this one, that looks pretty real. Although if you examine it real close, you'll find some things that could give away that we did clone it. I could see some little repeating areas here, but on first glance, it looks pretty good. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to use the clone stamp and we're going to take those people out of the picture, and I'll get started with that in just a minute. So if you come to Documents and Resources Handouts, you're going to look for Unit 2, the 5 cloning retouching exercise, and there's instructions here. Now these are actually older because they still use Pixlr, so I'm going to close this up right now. And what you are going to do is click on this link, which is the same as the link for the other ones that we originally used. It's a Google photo album, so I'm going to click on this and scroll down just a little and find the picture of the kids on the beach and just click on it. And once you see it isolated, you're going to right click on it and say copy image address like you've done before. And when you come to Photopea, you're going to go to File, Open from URL, and you're going to paste it in there. And I'll do Command V because I'm on a Mac. And it says current project, which is fine. And one thing I did not point out on the previous exercise, but I realize now as the more I work with Photopea that you can do this. If you double click on this long name here that has this long URL, you can double click here and you could change it. And I'd like you to call it 5 Kids on Beach. You could just call it Kids Beach. You don't even have to put cloning. You could just put 5 Kids Beach. It's actually the cloning exercise, but if you just do that, and then if you just want to do underscore and put your last name there, that will be helpful too, because it'll further identify it, and then just hit OK. So then when we export this, it'll export as a PSD, and we won't have to go rename it like we did on the dog soccer exercise. And we can also export it as a JPEG as well with that shorter name. So we don't have to worry about that anymore. Now, one thing we are going to do is we're going to make a new layer above this right here. And we're going to do that so that we can do all our cloning on a separate layer so we don't permanently disfigure our original layer in case we screw it up. So we want to let this alone and then work on a layer above. So what we're going to do is we're going to go down to our layer palette down here and add a new layer. It's the second one right next to the trash can, and it'll be called Layer 1. And you could rename these layers. So you could leave that as background. You can even double click on this name and just call it cloning. You could do that. So we could double click on that name and call it cloning, double click on that name and change the name. And now that we're going to paint on this new layer. So we're going to zoom in a little bit. We'll start with this area over here and just kind of get used to it a little bit. So I'm going to zoom in using Control+. And remember, you can hold down your space bar and kind of pan a little bit if you have any issue kind of scrolling over there. So I'll do that, and we'll just work at one part at a time. And this is just the way Photoshop works too. So we're going to use the clone stamp tool, which is this one over here. I'm going to select it, and you could see it uses a brush. It's a brush size, and if you remember from the previous exercise, if you use your left bracket, the one next to the letter P on your keyboard, you can make it smaller and you can make it bigger. It all depends what you're working on. If you're working in clouds or something where you don't have a lot of detail, you might make it a little bit bigger, and you still want to make it softer. So you don't want it really hard. So I'm going to go over here, and I can see it's at 64%. And somewhere around there between 60 and 70 is probably fine to start. If you need to get out of here, just kind of click over here. So there's my brush right now. Now I don't need the brush quite that big, so I'm just going to go a little bit smaller. Keep in mind you also have brush options over here, the brushes palette over here, where you can also do that. So if you don't want to go all the way over here, you have brush settings over here, and to make this go away, just click here. So what we're going to do is we're going to find an area and we're going to paint over. Now make sure you're on the cloning layer. I'm on that layer. And then also make sure you change this. Make sure you're not doing it from the current layer because there's nothing on the current layer. You want to use current layer and below. Or you could check all layers. But right now we'll just say current and below will be fine. And we won't worry about aligned right now. So I think we could leave that off right now. And we'll see if we need it checked as we go. So what I'm going to do first, I'll go back to my tool here. And this is probably a decent size right here. I'm going to split the difference with my brush. And what I'm going to do is hold down my Option key on Mac and my Alt key on Windows. And I'm going to hold down my key, and you'll get a little crosshair. Hold down the key, and then click, and then leave go. Leave go until you see your brush again. Now, if you move your brush, what it actually did is it has a little snapshot of where you targeted the area. Now, it doesn't mean you have to just keep stamping, although you could. You could go here and stamp, and then move over a little bit and stamp. But what you can also do is just kind of brush, just kind of paint across. Now you got to be careful because remember this changes a little bit. So I'm going to hold down my space bar and move over this way. And then I'm going to re-option click or re-alt click over here and set a new sample. Now make sure you move away. Don't start painting right now. Make sure you at least move away. And with this little sample here, you can kind of go over this. And I'm just going to click right here because it goes down a little bit. So I'll just try to line up those waves a little bit. And I'll do that. And that worked okay. And you could certainly do some of this area here. Now we're going to move up. So I'm going to Option click or Alt click up here and just kind of put some waves over her. Now you want to watch that you're not repeating exactly the same thing because that looks fake. So I'm going to go to the right side now, kind of alternate, and I'll Option click over here and I'll put in something here so it looks like it connects a little bit. So part of the skill of this is moving around a little bit, not just brushing back and forth or scrubbing back and forth. So I'll click in here, and you could even make your brush a little bigger. If you find you want to make the brush a little bit bigger, you can use your right bracket to go up a little bit. You could even make it softer if you want. You could see on here, it's not that soft. So I could go up here and take it down to maybe 50 or something. It'll be a little softer, and I'll click over here again. So now what I'll do is I'll Option click here and just kind of go over her. And again, I'm just stamping right now, which is fine. Now, here's where it gets a little tricky, so I'm going to move up. I'll scroll up a little bit, or you could use your space bar and move the image down. Now, we want to have a line that goes through her, so you have to look on either side. So I'm going to try to do something over here, and you don't want it to look exactly like something that's right nearby that looks fake. But let's see what happens. I'm just going to go here, and I did an Alt click, and I'm going to move over, and even before you click, you can kind of go here, and that doesn't look too bad. That looks all right. And I just clicked, and maybe I'll go over here, and you don't have to commit. Now that doesn't look right because it's using the same thing. So I'm going to Option click again. I'll try this over here. Does that look okay? That looks okay. I'll move up a little bit. Now I'll have to fix the area that goes through her, but that looks pretty good. The waves look good. All I'm looking at is the waves right now. And now if I want to go through her, I'm looking at this little kind of aqua-ish wave up here, so I'm going to Option click and go through. Now I'm going to do that again so I don't get the same little foam up there. I'll use this empty area here. Now remember, I'm Option clicking and then moving over and then just kind of lining it up and just clicking, and that actually looks pretty good. And you could keep going over. That seems to look okay, and that's taking me right over that other person there, so that looked okay. There's a little shadow in the water. Now, to get through this part, I want to Option click up here, so I'm matching the same kind of colors. There's a little purple tint up there. And I'll just go over a little bit, and look at that, she's gone. And if you're not sure about this part, I could go up here and even go through that and get rid of the part that had the little shadow there. So she's gone. I can move my brush out of the way to see that. And I could even zoom out just to show you what it looks like, and that looks pretty good. Now you could go and get rid of this because this is her reflection in the water, but you might not notice that. So I'm going to zoom into this area over here. And we have some people in the water we want to get rid of. And she's probably the most challenging one right now because she's kind of in the fore part of the wave a little bit right by the foam. So I'm going to Option click over here and see if I could just kind of go through her body there. And then I could go again. I don't have to reset my brush. I could keep going through there. And I could even go up here and get some of these people eliminated. And I'm just clicking. Now you be careful, like I'm kind of repeating things here, so kind of move up and down a little bit and maybe go in from the other side. Here I'm going to option click over here, and maybe I'll take these people out by coming in this way. And I'm moving down a little so I could see a little current to kind of follow a line. And that looks okay. And then I'll option click up here and just get rid of her head. And I'll put a little more purple up here. And that looks pretty good. Now, if you go back, you might see some of that. It might look a little fake, but that's okay. For now, we're just learning, so I'm going to zoom in again. And we have some other people here. And so I'm going to try to follow that little edge of the wave there. I'll zoom out a little bit. And again, you're hitting Alt click and then leave go of the Alt key. And then don't start painting yet. Just kind of hover over here. And I'll add that in, and that looks pretty good. There's a little like lighter kind of things that are there. Now, remember, if your brush is real big, it's going to sample a big area. So I'm going to take my brush down and then option click and see if I could sample a smaller area and then move over. And that looks a little better. And I'll kind of go through here and try to get that person out. And before I click here, I don't want to click here because it'll have that lighter area. Then I'll just go right next to that little thing in the water. Option click and then move over and just kind of stamp over it. Now notice everything I'm doing is on the cloning layer, so I could bring them back real easy. I don't want to mess with my original background. Everything is on a separate layer, and that's a good way to see before and after with that too. So I'm going to continue over here, hold my space bar and move over and get rid of these people. I'm actually almost done already. So I'm going to follow this little ridge here, and I'll option click and kind of go through the bottom of her body there. Oh, I turned off the cloning layer. That's why it wasn't working, which means I probably did that on the original. So I'm going to go back, and I have history up here. I could go back like undoing, and I'm going to undo that because you're going to do that by accident sometime. You're going to clone on your original. So I'm going to go back here, and I'll get right next to here, and I'll option click, and I'll get rid of her kind of body here, and then I'll go up and kind of get rid of her middle, and I might make the brush a little bit bigger when I do that. So I'll option click, and the nice thing is that you can kind of hover over and see this. In Pixlr, I don't think we could do that. I think we just had a guess, but in Photoshop and here, we can see that little sample, so we can almost kind of stamp through it, almost what we're supposed to do with the tool. We're stamping through it. And again, we want to avoid a lot of repetition. Sometimes we might want to make the brush bigger and a little smoother, but I'll hold my brush down, and I'll do this last part here. I'll make my brush a little bit bigger to go through these people at the end. I'll just option click, and I'll see if I could just go right over top of them. And I'll go up a little bit. Even if you're going off screen, it's not going to get rid of it. And that's it. And I'll zoom out. And that's all I'm going to do right now, at least for this video, but you could certainly go through and take away the shadow by using parts of the sand that are around it if you want to do that. But for now, that's fine. So that's all you really have to do with this. And, you know, it looks easy, but it takes a little practice to get it to look good. Now, if I want to save this, I'll do two things. I'll do File, Save as PSD, which will download it. And now it's downloaded as a PSD file. And then you could also do File, Export As, and save it as a JPEG. And again, you don't want it real big. You don't want the JPEG real big, so we'll do it like 400 like we did with Dog Soccer. And then you could just hit save. I don't know why it does twice like this, but it makes a little window here. So now I'm ready to save again with 400, and it should download it now. And that just downloaded it. So that's it. And then I'll go to my Warren. I'll go to Coursework, and I'll look for Unit 2, Exercise 5, and there it is. And I'll click on that. And all that you have to do, I'm going to turn this off so it's not an upload file. I'm just going to do the add comment again, and we're going to use this, and we're going to go and find it, and I'll hit upload, and it's Kids on Beach JPEG. I'm going to make sure it's the JPEG, and I'll choose that, and I'll insert it, and I'll hit OK, and there it is. And look how nice that looks. Now, we didn't do anything else. We didn't sharpen it. We didn't do anything like that. But we're just kind of practicing this clone stamp tool, which is a nice image editing, retouching type of tool. You can use it to get rid of power lines in photos and get rid of people from photos, all kinds of things like that. Fix photos that are old and ripped and torn and things like that. It's a really nice tool to use, but it takes a little time to get used to and to get more proficient at it. So I'm going to save this, And that's it for our clone stamp exercise using Photopea.